Okay, I'd like to introduce Valerie Thomas, also known as Hacktress09 on Twitter. She's a principal information security consultant for SecureCon LLC and specializes in social engineering and physical penetration testing. She is the ninja. Ben did.
Oh, thanks, Ben.
She has led information security assessments for DISA before joining the private industry, and is the co-author of Building an Information Security Awareness Program, Defending Against Social Engineering and Technical Threats with Bill Gardner. So without further ado, Valerie Thomas.
Well, slightly further. Okay. All right, I'm not a master of the wireless mic yet, so bear with me. All right, good. Everybody in the back, we good? Okay, if at some point you can't hear me, make some kind of like rude gesture, but make it different than the ones that you normally do so that I understand it's, for sound. Okay, so let's talk some more about social engineering. I guess I don't really need an intro slide. I'm not used to getting a professional introduction, so thank you very much. Used to having to tell my own story, so that's cool. Really quick, before we get into all the good stuff, I wanted to take a quick minute to say thanks to all the organizers, all the parameter folks that are off doing other things now. This kind of conference takes an insane amount of time and effort to put together. So if you see Dave, if you see Renee, if you see Ben, you see Jessica, anybody in one of these shirts, take a minute and say thanks, because they really put so many hours into making this happen for you all. So, without further ado, let's talk about social engineering. So if you missed the keynote or slept through the keynote, I only saw a few snoozers this morning, so I think that last night was probably not a big party night. We'll see how tomorrow morning's keynote goes. That will be the good judge. So what is social engineering anyway? So social engineering is all about persuading somebody to either do something or give you some kind of information to aid you as an attacker. So that really opens up a lot of possibilities, right? I mean, that could be almost anything. Why does it work? So unfortunately, as humans, we're very flawed. We have a lot of things that are baked into our personalities that we can't really help. So becoming aware of those is kind of step 0 in preventing social engineering attacks. So we're kind of helpful by nature, right? You see somebody with a big box, you want to help them out, hold the door. All those things that your parents taught you growing up, do unto others, golden rule and all of that. We're also not very aware. And this sounds kind of strange when you're talking to a room full of security people, but when it comes to being aware of your surroundings and the people and the things around you, it's amazing what we don't recall. So a trick that I use for my children, because they don't really like the school things so much. They don't really get along very well with the teachers. For my oldest, he has a problem with eye contact. So the teacher will misinterpret that as disrespect. So instead of telling him, keep your head up, pay attention to the teacher, I told him that by the end of the week, I wanted to know what color each teacher's eyes were. And he had to be able to repeat them back to me in order to make him look and to focus on the eyes. So even though he's not a real big eye contact person, it's still a little bit enough of a trick to help him out to get the job done. So we provide a lot of free information as humans as well. And when I prepare clients for audits, I do a lot of exercises like this. So the most basic one is, does anybody know what time it is? And always, somebody replies back and says, yeah, it's 1:15. But that wasn't the question. The question was, do you know what time it is? The correct answer is yes. Right? So when you're preparing for an audit or any other thing, try not to give too much information away. People are also impatient. That helping, kind, nurturing nature only gets you so far. So for a lot of attacks, just stretching somebody's patience is a great way to get in through the door, to get the help desk guy to give you what you need, just to get you off the phone, and so on. So let's talk about threats. we've got a lot of threats out there, right? I mean, we've got these guys, we've got the ninjas, bad ninjas, these guys, and then we've got the folks like this, which is a whole nother talk, so we just won't go there. But what are the real threats to our network? What are the real threats to our organizations? So there are 4 big ones, and they're pretty basic, right? This, for some of you who aren't old enough to remember, this is what telephones used to look like with a cord and a rotary dial. That can be a very big tool. And the name tag. Oh my goodness, the name tag. So what's number 4? The people behind all of these things. So all of these products, you can still carry them on the airplane for now, so they can't really be that dangerous, can they? So these are all tools of the social engineer. And some of these Jason demonstrated this morning. These are the tools that social engineers will use against your users, number 4. So the key to social engineering success, giving away some of my secrets here. When I teach folks how to become engineers and social engineers and how to do this kind of work, either for their company or on their own as a consultant, this is the most important thing that I try to really bring home. So you want to be able to obtain the information without raising suspicion. So in the psychology world, that's called fight or flight. There are a whole bunch of terms that go along with it, but the most basic sense is whenever you're confronted with what you perceive as a threat, it's kind of that little BS meter that's kind of tickling in the back of your brain. So when one of the vendors out there says, man, I have got this product, it's going to solve all of your problems, all you've got to do is just sign right here. You know that like little twist in your gut that just happened? That's fight or flight. So for social engineers, we really want to blend in so that we don't trigger any of that. Back to the duck test, right? If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. If I'm wearing a company shirt, then I obviously work here. I belong here, right? So all of these things that I'm going to cover are about how not to trigger fight or flight. So let's talk a little bit about some of the traits of social engineers. All right, social engineers are very similar to hackers. Okay, we're not kids in mom's basement with our hoods up and our masks on, like they have in all the stock photos of hackers. Social engineers, they're right up there with scam artists, unfortunately, right? Because we're sort of professional scammers. People-oriented. Social engineer, one that's very comfortable, will think nothing of just walking up to you and chatting you up. Might be about the weather, might be about whatever surroundings that you're in, if you're in the airport, at a conference. Social engineers are not afraid to talk to people. They're also really good actors. So when you're trying to impersonate somebody, either a vendor or an employee or so on and so forth, you kind of have to be able to put yourself into that role. So if I'm going to put myself into the role of a vendor, like Jason mentioned earlier this morning, don't go in acting to be the plumber if you don't know anything about plumbing, because it will come back and it will bite you. So you need to be a good actor, but know your limits. A small misconception about social engineers is, oh, well, you just do social engineering. You don't understand anything about technology. Well, that's what brings social engineering home. It's a whole big circle. You need to be able to use the people behind the technology in order to exploit whatever exploit it is that we need to do at the time, to either further your hack, to obtain physical access, so on and so forth. So it's really a complete circle. So some of our clients, we do a lot of work at SecureCon in the critical infrastructure space. So some of our clients, when they order a pen test, a real pen test, they'll include social engineering. And sometimes they'll try to put strings on it and say, well, you can only use social engineering for the physical portion of the assessment, but not the network. So it really doesn't work that way. It's got to be across the entire plane. So a lot of times we use it in conjunction with pen tests, but sometimes we do just straight up social engineering assessments on their own as well. Everybody is a target. Nobody is exempt. You have to look really closely at the organization before you decide what your attack vector is going to be and who your primary targets are. For the most part, this is the high-level hit list. Developers, man, I love to target developers. It's so ingrained with the way that they do software development these days that it's all about results. All about results. You know, I don't care what you call it, agile development, waterfall, whatnot. It's all results driven. And the only thing they're worried about is getting their job done. And if that means that they have to click on some kind of applet, as long as they're not a Java developer, chances are they're just going to do it because they're trained to get the job done, not necessarily look at the security side of things. So earlier this year, back in February, I did a presentation at a development conference. So as a security person, to kind of like cross-pollinate into a development conference, that's a whole new experience. If you haven't done it before, it's a pretty good exercise to kind of open your eyes to the way the development side works. So everybody that I chatted up at the bar that night, or caught them in the hallway, they said, "Oh, you work in security." I don't really think about security much. I said, "Well, I do." I said, "I don't really think about development much." They're like, "Yeah." And that's kind of where the lines got drawn. Developers, for now, aren't really ingrained to look at security. So in combination with the way that they're ingrained, they also usually have elevated access on the network, or at least a local admin account. So that really starts to give us a foothold into the network and a really good starting point to where we can start to elevate privileges and move across the network. Network engineers, kind of the same way, right? Their job is to make sure that the network does what it's supposed to do. All about uptime, all about making sure everything routes properly. And really, that's their job. They're not paid to think about security, so they don't give it a second thought. So that's kind of the hit list there. Non-technical employees, that's a whole nother ballgame right there. Folks that are very public-facing are really large targets. So that's going to be your PR people. Anybody that interfaces with folks from the outside on a regular basis. So billing, accounting. Folks that are opening attachments and sending emails back and forth, primarily outside of the organization. Huge targets, because that's their job. Their job is to open emails and open attachments that come from outside of the company. So if I want to target somebody like that, I'm working within their normal daily parameters of their job, so it doesn't trigger that fight or flight so much, because they're doing what they're supposed to do. So as a social engineer, I can use that against them, but on the defensive side, I need to learn to train and to prepare those folks for that kind of situation. I use your own information against you. So this one's kind of hard for some of the less security-aware companies, let's put it that way. First thing I do whenever I start a social engineering engagement or a physical pen test, I've got to do the research. So I'm one of those over-planners. I have to plan about plans and then make a plan about the other plan. It's just the way that my mind works. So the first place I start is the company website. And that always kind of takes people by surprise because they think, oh, well, you're going to go to the dark web, or you're going to go to some, scary place and pull out all this sensitive data, and I didn't know it was there. But I'm going to start with what you're going to tell me as a company. And a lot of folks don't realize the information that they're putting out there as a company as a whole. So we're going to pick on EY.com a little bit here, just because. So job descriptions. These are really cool for social engineers, right? So if I wanted to know where the data center was, or maybe one of their primary data center locations, your favorite keyword is infrastructure, because that's where all of the infrastructure engineers would be hired for. So in this case, probably a pretty good chance that it's in Alpharetta, Georgia, so suburb of Atlanta. Sometimes you have to put this information together yourself, aggregate it. Other times, they will just come out and tell you in the news. So let's look a little bit more at job experiences. So in job descriptions, it's very tricky. You have to be able to write a description to get the right person interested in the job and get the right set of skills without revealing too much. So it's almost like poker, not revealing too much of your hand, just enough to get the right people interested. So if we look here, we see some keywords. They've done a pretty good job of scrubbing this job description. We see proxy, okay, IDS, IPS, Windows, AD. All right, none of that's really terribly unique, right? So we'll look around a little bit more. So if I wanted to deploy some malware on this network via social engineering or another way, it would be really helpful for me to know what kind of antivirus they're using. So I'm more of the style of, I want my malware to work when the antivirus is on. I don't want to have to disable it to do my deeds. That's just my preference. So where would I be able to find what kind of antivirus they were using? Well, there are a few ways that we can do it. We can pick up the telephone, we can call 5 or 6 of the really big antivirus vendors and pretend to be from that company and ask for sales and say, I'd like to renew my license, or I'd like to get a quote, we're coming up on our expiration date. Salespeople will tell you anything because they think that they're going to get a sale. So that's one way to do it. But, 5, 6 phone calls, I have to talk to, all these different vendors, and I've got to use caller ID spoofing. It's kind of a lot of work. So instead, I like to use LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is the phone book for social engineers. I'm actually working on a blog post right now for statofsecurity.com that's actually going to be titled that. LinkedIn is the phone book for social engineers, because there is hardly anything about a company that I can't find that I need to know from LinkedIn. So it may not be from the current employee, it may be from an ex-employee who's moved on. So I don't know this guy, but he's been in a lot of my presentations lately, so if he ever finds me in a dark alley, you'll know that it was probably this guy who's very angry that I'm using his LinkedIn stuff as an example. But it's nothing that an attacker wouldn't do. So he's actively looking for other things, which that always kind of baffles me. If you list your current employer and then say that you're also looking for opportunities, I don't know. Maybe HR doesn't read these things, I'm not sure. Or they don't read them that way. Anyway, so if we look through some of his skills here and qualifications, and I kind of grabbed what was important to us. All right, Windows Server, blah, 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 Drac and ILO, right? So we got some Dell, we got some HP. Wow, what's this like toward the middle? Symantec Antivirus. Awesome. Okay, that's cool. So now I have a great idea of what kind of endpoint suite that they're using. So when I'm going to start to test my homegrown malware, I'm going to test it on the free trial of Symantec's endpoint security. And that took 10 minutes of searching, maybe. EY.com is kind of a really large target, so there was a lot of data to sift through. If you're looking at a mid-sized company, it won't take very long because they won't have very many previous or current IT or security people. So we've got this cool data, and I've got my cool custom malware. But if I want to do a phishing attack, I need to get some email addresses to put it all together, right? So there are a few ways that you can do that. There are some tools out there that automate it. They're pretty good. Some are hit and miss. If you want to do it the old-fashioned way, the only thing that you really need to know is the email address naming scheme. I'm going to unpin this just for a second. Oh, excuse me. Okay. So all you really need to know is the naming scheme. So I know, based on looking around their website, again, they told me what I needed to know from the beginning, that all of their email addresses are at ey.com. Cool. So if I want to make up a whole big target list, all I need now are the names, because I know what they end in. I can just use some awk and set and tack it all on the end once I have the names. I need to see what the beginning schema looks like. If it's first dot last, first initial, last name. All can be done with a little Google hacking, just with at ey.com and email. Should be enough. But if I want to get a whole bunch of names really quick, without paying for a premium LinkedIn membership, because those are kind of expensive, I just flip over to the other side of social media, because lots of folks are on Facebook. So it works very, very well. So just be careful when you're listing employers and listing things on your Facebook profile, because somebody like me might be looking. Let's talk about Twitter. I like Twitter. I'm a Twitter user. I also use it for hunting ground, I guess you could say, as a social engineer. So there's this cool thing All right, so there are only 2 times I'm ever going to endorse Microsoft products, and this is one. So Bing Maps has this really cool plugin for Twitter mapping. So folks that don't disable the geolocation on their mobile Twitter application, it basically embeds the location in each tweet that they send. So take a second, go into the settings on Twitter and make sure that's disabled. Just uncheck it. I did not do a map of this morning, so I might do one later just to see who's doing what. So I pulled some old data. This is from DEF CON, right? So, you know, everybody's at DEF CON, everybody's tweeting. I thought this one was funny because they're talking about, you know, social engineering. So I thought I'd pick on this guy a little bit. I hope he's not here. Another dark alley candidate if I don't come back. So what's cool about this is, you know, I can kind of look at his account and I can see where he's been and where he's tweeted from. So as a social engineer, as an attacker, if I want to pose an attack where I pretend to be him, or if I want to target him, it would be very, very helpful for me to know where he is. And that should be pretty easy because he's telling everybody. He just doesn't know it. So being based out of the DC area, I have a lot of federal clients, so this is always kind of a good one for them. You know, this is Crystal City in Virginia. Not very exciting, but this one gets a little bit more exciting. You're not even allowed to have phones in there, so I didn't out the people that are tweeting from the middle. But they may not have phones anymore. I'm not really sure. So be sure that location services are disabled. Just something really quick to check. But all of these pieces we use to create a whole attack campaign based on our target and based on what we're looking for. So I'm also a big fan of Foca. Everybody was real big into metadata a couple of months ago with the whole NSA thing, right? And then it kind of died down and we have other things to be angry about as a group. But metadata didn't go away. So one of the great things that we do, we usually do this not only in social engineering, but as part of an external penetration test or a vulnerability assessment, is we'll run the client's website through Foca. So Foca will basically go out, it'll crawl the website, it will identify all of the documents that are there. And you can customize this. If you don't want to look for PDFs, you don't have to look for PDFs and so on. And you can even add your own extensions into it, which is pretty cool. It'll go out and it'll crawl, and it'll tell you how many it's found. And then you can choose what you download, but I download them all because I'm like that. And then once they're all downloaded, it will extract the metadata from them. So once it's extracted the metadata, you can get some really cool pieces of information. Usually it tells you what version of Office the document was used, that was used to create the document. OS, there's some really good username spots in there. It harvests email addresses pretty well. Not so great on the output. Doesn't have a really good like CSV export format, so it takes a little working with the data to get it to where you can use it. But what it can gather in a very short amount of time is very, very surprising. So that's another great tool where folks are just giving away this information and they don't even know it. All about the small stuff. So they say something about the devil is in the details. And this is where Jason and I differ very much in the roles of social engineering. He's a great go in there and wing it kind of guy, and that's awesome because it works really well for him. But the planner in me can't do that. I just absolutely cannot do that. That cannot be plan A. That might be plan F or G, but that can't be plan A. And I spend a good 98, maybe even 99% of a social engineering engagement or a physical penetration test in the research and planning phase. Because if I'm going to walk into a place that I don't belong, I really, really need to be able to act like I belong there in the proper way. So being a female in this industry, I can't really use the, hey, I'm here to fix the computer excuse. Just the way it is, right? But if I'm from audit, totally believable. But not quite to the point where I can say, hey, I'm here to fix the computer, I'm from IT. Not quite there, but we're getting there. So when it comes to planning these attacks, I'm talking about down to the day, down to the hour, down to the shift. We do a lot of physical assessments in the critical infrastructure world. So earlier this year, we did a fairly large assessment on some natural gas plants. And we had the attack timed down to when they were going to shift change. We knew when each guard was going, when they were shift changing here and shift changing there. We needed it to be towards sunset because we didn't have a lot of good options. Because we needed the cover of dusk to get past the video cameras. So the case of the missing floor mat. So planning works really great, except for when it doesn't. So while planning is really important, you still have to be able to kind of roll with things when they happen. So we had everything planned out, myself and a coworker of mine. Natural gas plant. We're all decked out, coveralls, hard hats, steel-toed boots, all that stuff that you're supposed to wear, so that we look like, well, kind of like the village people. But we blended in with everybody else, so that's really what mattered, right? So it's Monday, it's shift change, it's, third shift is coming on, right? So we're talking like close to 11 p.m. It's dark. I'm like, all right, this is perfect. I couldn't get a good access card clone on these guys, so the bad plan, even though it was a plan, was for me to go in and distract the guards up at the guard shack so that my very tall 6'5" coworker could hop the fence. So how you do that with fences that have barbed wire on the top is you use the floor mat from your car. You just kind of sling it over the top, and then you can use that to climb over and, not slice your hands and your arms all up. So he's got the floor mat, and I've got the car on the other side, and we've just got Bluetooth. We don't have a whole lot of cool spy gear. So I'm just about to enter the guard shack to distract everything, and we had chosen a spot that was sort of on this overpass so that he could get over to the fence pretty easily. We weren't really sure how he was going to get out, but that really wasn't my problem, so I wasn't overly concerned on how he was getting back out, because if you don't take that floor mat with you, that's a one-way trip over that fence. So I'm just about to go to the guard shack, and he says, hey, that area is blocked off. I can't get to that part of the fence. And we needed that part of the fence, not just because of the overpass, but because it was a partial blind spot in their video cameras. So I'm like, well, that's awesome. Okay. We didn't have a plan B for that night. So plan B was for me to show up the next morning with my clipboard, dressed as my village person get up there, and to tell them that I'm from audit and that I need to check asset tags on some of the computers that are in the training center. I knew there was a training center because it was right inside the fence and it had a large sign on it that said training center, which I found on Google Maps. So I don't even have to get close to know that there was a training center there, so that was good. So I always have a plan, even if it's a really bad one, and I did not expect this to work. So I go traipsing up with my clipboard, my somewhat new-looking getup. It's very obvious that I don't belong there. So the general rule of thumb is to always blend in, but if you need to stick out, you need to have a really good reason to stick out. So IT people in natural gas plant and any kind of like manufacturing areas, we tend to stick out, right? Like we're not used to all that stuff, like watching your head and all of the different power sources. We're computer people. We have our own little environment. It's, a cool, dry place, just like perishables. So I go walking up to the guard shack there, and I go in, and the two guys sitting there, and I said, here from audit, I need to check the asset tag numbers on these 6 workstations that are inside of the training center. Now I have a clipboard, right? Everything is better with a clipboard. I don't care what you're doing. If you're carrying a clipboard, you look so much more professional. And if you really need to do like an over-the-top kind of thing, it's one of those metal ones. It's kind of got, you can put stuff inside of it. This was just a basic clipboard, though. And the guy says, well, who's your on-site contact for here? And I didn't have one, and I didn't have any good names for the folks that worked there. Folks that normally work in those kind of positions aren't really well known on the LinkedIn scene, right? They're not in the phone book. So it's a little difficult for me to dig up their names as easily. So I said, I don't really have an on-site contact. This is my manager's name, who was the manager of IT. I had purchased an online number and made sure that it was forwarding to my boss back in Alexandria in case they wanted to call my manager to check. But he didn't want to. He said, well, you're supposed to have a contact. I said, I don't know, man. I said, I'm new. And they told me to come over here and write these numbers down. And then after this, I have to go over to the other plant and do the same thing. So he looks at me. He looks at my badge. We'll get into that in a minute. He looks at me again, and he slides the clipboard over. He says, well, you're still going to have to sign in. I said, okay. So I'm signing in the employee sign-in sheet. And I said, well, how am I going to get through that turnstile thing? You don't want to use the proper term, because then they know that you know what you're talking about. How do I get through that turnstile thing there to get in? He said, oh, well, I'll let you in. That's how it works. Okay. So he lets me in, and basically forgets about me. So I wander all around the whole entire complex. We're talking like acres here. Like it's not a small complex. Into the training center. They just so happened to be teaching class at the time. And they were on break. So I was chatting up some of the folks in there. I was having them read the numbers for me so that I would actually have some numbers in case, somebody bothered to look when I came back out. That way that they remembered I was there. I wrote some numbers down. Everything was routine. So they let me back out, back into the guard station, and as I'm signing out, they start asking questions about their computers at home. Back to this, sometimes you have to make it up on the fly kind of thing. So I have to stand there for like 10 minutes and answer questions about antivirus and stuff that they do at home and why their computer is so slow. I told him it was probably because of the antivirus that he had on there, which I felt a little bad about, but he was using AVG, so then I didn't feel so bad anymore. So I wrote down some names of some tools, gave them some ideas, and basically went on my way. So the other part of social engineering is, we focus so much on getting in and getting the data, but you've got to have that exit plan. You've got to have a graceful way to get out. So had I just signed out and just bulleted out the door, it might have been a little bit suspicious. The whole time I'm talking, the sweat is starting to trickle down my back. I'm going, there's no way they're going to think I'm from here. There's no way. What was interesting about that was when we were doing the outbrief, I asked the head of physical security, I said, I know sometimes that you make firing decisions based on the results of this kind of test. I would really like it if you would not fire them. They didn't follow the procedure, but I can guarantee you after this experience, that will never happen with those two again. There is no better teachable moment than one like that. So I don't go back in and out myself right then, especially if I have other sites to do. But sometimes they do let me do an on-site outbrief and sit down and really talk with everybody. Some folks take it really well, other folks not so well. So this past weekend, I had my son, we were going to somewhere for school clothes, and he gets into the front passenger seat of my car, and he looks down and he's like, where's your floor mat? That's a story for another day, son. Confession number 6, that's not lipstick in my bag. So I have a huge lady purse. It's the only way I can think of to call it. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be for like a laptop. But I never use it for that. So instead of, ladylike things, I have RFID stealing equipment in mine. So these cool little boxes here, I did not bring them with me. You can get close to me. I don't have anything that's trying to steal anybody's card credentials. These two cool little devices have really started to change the way that physical pen tests are done in several ways. So the one without the cover, that's designed by a company called Bishop Fox. A couple of years ago, they unveiled this at Black Hat. And basically what these devices do is they're modified card readers, just like the ones on the wall that you would use at your company, powered by a battery pack of some sort. You can see in the Bishop Fox one, I've just got AA batteries in there. Man, did that get really, really tiring of always replacing them. So what you do with this is you put it in the big lady bag, or if some of the guys are coming with me, I have a backpack. Actually, it's an Easy Council backpack, but holds everything just perfectly in it. So this is about a square, foot square. Fits really well in a backpack. So we walk around anywhere that's not a controlled area in our target location. So if that's the parking lot, if that's around the building, if they have an open cafeteria, just depending on how their facility is laid out. More recently, we got the most hits at a gas station a couple of blocks down the road because everybody would go before their shift to the gas station and everybody's wearing their access card right out on their chest or clipped to their belt, just walking around. So this has about a 3-foot read range. So that's pretty good. I mean, give or take about that close. It's pretty easy to get that close to somebody. Some of the older tools like the Proxmark, the Proxmark only has a read range of about that much. That is really awkward. I don't care if you're a female or not, trying to get that close to somebody is very difficult to do. So I was very thankful that the guys came out with this design because I've used it quite a bit since then. The one on the lower left-hand corner, or is that your right hand? The other one with the lid on, that's an I-class reader. So HID's I-class is kind of like the, not quite the gold standard, but it's very prevalent. So if you flew to get here in the airport, you will notice that there are I-class readers all over the place. Suddenly I'm a little sad that I didn't bring it along. But anyway, these cards are used a lot in government. They're used a lot in critical infrastructure. They're encrypted. We're not going to get too deep into it, but basically HID decided to encrypt everything to make it secure, but they encrypted it all with the same key. So then when some really smart folks in Germany a few years ago extracted the key from a reader and published it, they didn't really know what to do. So their way of dealing with it is just to say that it doesn't really happen and that it's not really a big deal. So these long-range readers, they really change that threat perspective from, all right, somebody's got to be able to get really super close to me, to, hey, this person just walked past me in the gas station and picked up my ID credentials, and I had no idea. If you're in a major metropolitan area with a metro, it's very, very easy. Sometimes, and this is what I do when I'm bored, is I'll take one of these and I'll just go on the metro for a while and just count the number of card hits that I get. So it reads the data and then it saves it to a micro SD card that you can't really see on the board. Now the I-class reader, the one at the bottom there, that one uses a board, it's called Ravenhead, and some folks unveiled that at DerbyCon last year. That's just my really crappy way of keeping it all together, was in a pencil box with some duct tape and foam. But that device does the same thing, and it has a built-in Bluetooth module. So the problem that we were having was that we would get a bunch of card reads, but they weren't time-stamped, so we didn't really know who they were for. So with the Bluetooth module added on, there's also a mobile app that goes along with it. So you got your phone in your pocket, the reader in your bag, and then your phone will vibrate each time that you get a read, because it's saving it to the micro SD and it's sending it to your phone. So you can kind of make a mental note of who you walked by at that time. That's important because most physical access systems, if the guards are actually paying attention, if you scan a card, the picture on it will pop up on the monitor. 97% of the time, they never look. But we did have an incident a few weeks ago where my boss had used a card and we didn't know who it belonged to, and it actually belonged to a woman. My boss does not look like a woman. So this was a small problem for him. So I'm not going to get too deep into RFID. That's one of my really other side favorite things to do. If you have questions on it, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. By no means an expert on RFID. But what that means is that we can take that data and use it in different ways. So when I first presented this to a client a handful of years ago, they said, well, that's not really a threat because you can't get those access cards just anywhere. Those have to come right from HID, and they're very controlled and they're very hard to get. So when I did their test again this year, I decided to make my point. I bought 700 cards off eBay. Actually, that's a really, really good price, too. So not only was I bargain shopping, I got exactly what I needed. I had more cards than they had employees at this point, but I'll use them again for something else. And the printers on the bottom, what are these things? So a few years ago, we had a client that was getting ready to purchase a new badge printing system. So these are card printers at the bottom here. And one of our folks that was on site thought of me. I don't know why. He said, hey, we'd really like to buy those. Can we buy those before you put them to surplus? And it was a little awkward at first because it was, why do you want them? To make badges. But then they said okay once we started talking about money, and then they were all right with it. But you can get these on eBay as well. You can get a used one for $700-ish. But these will basically print really, really nice ID cards. So on this last physical test, after I bought my 700 cards, I basically spent 6 hours making an exact replica of their badges and putting our faces on them, and then just mass printed them. So that as we got card credentials, I could program them on the fly, but it still looked like it belonged to us. Back to almost anything can be bought online. So sometimes we have to buy our way in the door, I guess you could say. So the corporate logo, the power of the corporate logo. If I'm wearing a shirt with a corporate logo on it, and I have my really, really nice fake ID card on, 95% of the time, nobody ever questions if I belong there. A while back, we had to do something very similar with coveralls for a critical infrastructure provider. Got to be careful here on my words. And at the outbrief, I brought the patches with me. And it made them very upset. They said, where did you get these? eBay. Said, I paid $1.15 for each one of those. Can I have them back, please? They didn't give them back. I don't think we billed them either. But even though you might not be able to buy your own online, you can most certainly make your own. So this is the only way that I know how to use the iron. Is, you buy your uniform jacket, you buy these blank patches. I think I got a stack of like 20 off Amazon for $1. Printable iron-on template paper, right? And then you got to iron it on there just right so that you don't split the logo at the seams. But yeah, it took me almost all 20. But after that, I had a perfect replica of the ABM jacket. So ABM is a major commercial cleaning company. So a lot of times they are the cleaning company for our clients. So if I need to look like I blend in, I just use my trusty ABM jacket, and it usually gets the job done. So just about anything can be bought online or fabricated with bought online things to make whatever identity you need. This one I just kind of added on a whim because we've been doing a lot of this lately, so I'm outing another one of my secrets. Some of our more mature clients have done a really great job of teaching their user base not to click on links, but they forgot about these. Anybody know where that goes? I don't. Don't scan it. No, really, I don't know where it goes. So don't I think it might go to Google, but please don't. So while they're really great at not clicking on phishing links, they're not so great about not scanning QR codes. So a while back, we had a social engineering engagement with this same client. It's got a really mature program. So I said, well, how about we do something different this time around? I said, you guys do an awesome job with phishing. It's really cool. I don't really want to focus on that with email too much. And they said, okay. So they don't have controlled parking at their facility, so we printed up some cool coupon flyers. Ours didn't look this good. All right, this is one that I just snagged online before my talk. It was for a local business, a local area, something or other. One that offered employee discounts to the client company. So we printed up a big stack of these, 20, 30, I think, and we just slapped them on everybody's windshield because parking wasn't controlled, physical security wasn't really so interested in the parking lot. We didn't go near the buildings, so that's all they really cared about. It's amazing how many people will scan something if they think they're going to get something free. So be very, very wary of QR codes. So all these attacks are really fun, and they're cool to do, and they're funny to learn about, but they're not going away, and they're getting more and more mature. So that was my obligatory cat picture for my slides. It is a presentation because I had one cat picture in here. So how do we stop that? So a couple of years ago, I found that I had a really difficult time in my outbriefs with senior management when somebody at the end of the table would raise their hand and say, how do I stop social engineering attacks? And I didn't really have a good reference for them. I didn't really have anywhere to say, here, go to this website, read this document. There's lots of really great stuff about how to do social engineering, but there's not a whole lot on how to defend against social engineering. So I put this together just more out of necessity for my clients, and then decided to go ahead and put it out there for everybody to use. It's detailed in the book. It's also blogged on Information Security Buzz. So it's a whole process, though, and that's what's very difficult. When you get a framework in place, it's not just one piece, two piece. That's why defending against social engineering attacks is so, A, difficult to do, and B, it's very difficult to explain. So if you need to explain to somebody at a C level, hey, there are these really bad threats out there, for social engineering, and they'll say, how do you fix it? And you say, well, we have to do this, and we have to do this, and we have to do this. But we have to keep doing it over and over and over again. So that's very difficult to sell for a few reasons. One, it costs more money because you have to keep repeating it. And two, it doesn't work like operating system patches. Like, you can't just patch something once and then forget about it because it's patched for that particular threat. People are very different. We forget a lot. We have to be reminded very, very often. So selling the whole experience or the whole framework makes a little bit more sense. But I still don't have a lot of good tools for explaining that at a C level. So that's kind of my next little side project that I'm working on. So if you have ideas, please drop me a DM on Twitter. Very interested to hear from you. I am close on time. What you can do, A, stop wearing your work badge outside of work. This is my biggest pet peeve ever, because it just advertises to the entire world that, hey, I'm so-and-so and I work in that building. Please come skim my access card. That's what that says to me. So they make these really cool RFID blocking holders. If you don't have one, I highly recommend that you get one, because I don't want somebody getting into the building using my credentials. Lots of places are starting to issue these with their updated badges. A lot of our federal clients are. Some of our critical infrastructure folks are, starting to get on that wagon now. RFID vulnerabilities and RFID hacks are not going away. They're just going to keep growing. So instead of just playing whack-a-mole and trying to patch, oh, this one card is vulnerable to this, let's figure out how to deal with that. We need to look at a higher level solution and layer defenses that way. So RFID blocking card holders are a great way to start with that, because it stops the distance tool from being able to read the card. I have to use one of these if I have something on me when I'm using the tool. Otherwise, I just read my own card over and over again, and it makes me very sad. They also have RFID blocking wallets for those tap and pay credit cards. I don't know if anybody's seen those or not. I hate those things. This audience, I'm sure everybody has nuked theirs and their NFC chip no longer works. But your non-educated workforce doesn't know about that. So a while back, I had a client that asked me to do a presentation for their security day. They said, hey, you do all this awesome work for us. We want you to teach everybody how to protect themselves against these kinds of hacks, scammers and things. Okay. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, I don't know how to talk to users. Okay, user talk. Because they live in a very different world than we do. I wish I could take credit for this. Whoever did this is just awesome. Yes, it's very applause-worthy. I'm looking to see who's changing their password right now. Sorry if I outed you. Just add a 1 on the end, it'll be fine. So how do we patch our people? Like I mentioned before, it's a whole process. And Jason had some really great points this morning about really driving it home, making it matter to them. So when I did that presentation after I figured it out, I was really stressed about that one. I said, I know how to talk to hackers, I don't know how to talk to users. So that took me quite a bit of time and some surveys on some very unfortunate family members of mine who were forced to sit through my presentation to really get that ironed out. So when that day came, it was their annual Security Day event. And their, I guess he's the deputy chief or something or other, it was federal. When the guy in charge was helping me set up, he said, well, you know, it's probably not going to be a very big crowd. Don't worry about it if a lot of people don't show up. You know, we don't really have very good attendance at these things. Oh, okay. I don't care about how many people aren't in the room. I'm here for the people that are in the room. He said, all right, well, just don't expect too many. So as we're finishing setting up the projector and all that, you know, the 25 seats that they had in there fill up. And then they start coming in and standing in the back. And then they started lining up around the wall. And then the safety people said no more. And then they started lining up in the foyer area, trying to peek in the door to get a good look to see what was on the slides. So after the presentation, the deputy director came up to me and he said, how did you do that? How did you get so many people here? Who did you tell? I said, I didn't talk to anybody. I said, I'm pretty sure it had something to do with the title. So the title was How Hackers and Scammers Are Using Your Personal Data Against You. I said, I made it matter to them. I made it interesting. His session was titled, you know, 2013, insert agency here, required annual awareness training. And like nobody showed up. And I felt really bad. But it's all about doing training in disguise. So I've got some stuff, some separate presentations on social engineering your own, basically, how to trick your users into learning without realizing that they're really learning good habits. Got some good presentations on that. There's some of that covered in the book. Happy to answer questions about it or whatever you might need. Always open to new ideas because this is always changing. I'm going to leave on this note because I think that this belongs in every training ever, but I did not come up with it. So if you think about scanning that QR code, just use this nice reference chart, and it will help guide you along your way. I hope that you're taking a picture and not scanning. Anyway, thanks so much for hanging out with me. I know I'm standing in between you and lunch, so I will let you get on to that and catch us up a little bit on the schedule. Dave's waving. What kind of wave was that? Was it a get out of the way, or?
Don't leave for lunch.
Oh, that was a don't leave for lunch yet. Okay, so I'll be around if you guys have questions.